let's talk about this creator's post for a minute. They had it not do edible, not stitchable. I'm sure that's because they didn't really want people talking about it, but let's talk about the actual legit research. So many people don't know this, but they should. Ozempic has actually been on the market they originally went on the market in 1992. There were some concerns and it got pulled off the market for about 3 years in 1997, came back on the market fully in 2001, and since then other drugs like Trulicity also entered the market. I think them in like 2012, if I'm being honest. I could be off there, but I think it's 2012. So Jardiance is another one. They're all GLP-1s. Do we have enough data? Well, yes, the long-term data actually shows that long-term use causes atrophy of the optic nerve specifically, which means it probably targets other nerve tissue as well. The long-term data was on the drugs that were being used for diabetes medication, not on the drugs for weight loss, but we should also talk about what's happening with the weight loss drugs. We know, for instance, that people are ending up with symptoms that look very similar to eating disorders, with the lack of desire to eat, the nausea and vomiting, the severe diarrhea. Those things are all things that we expect with particular eating disorders, where people are controlling their caloric intake or binging on their caloric intake and then using a means to get rid of said calories, whether that be expelling it via their oral cavity or using a laxative. And so those are some of the side effects that also come with these medications. What does the research also show? It also shows that it's very good at lowering A1C, which is the amount of sugar in the blood over a 3-month time period. That is good because it actually lowers the amount of risk to the nerves for something like diabetic neuropathy from being exposed to too much sugar for too long. Every cell in your body has a GLP-1 receptor, including your heart. So the effects for heart disease are significantly improved. And I think part of that also has to do with the fact that a lot of these GLP-1s, the GLP-2s, GLP-3s that haven't quite hit the market yet, unless you're using a gray market product, they specifically target visceral fat. Visceral fat is that dangerous fat that builds up in the midsection around your organs that can create severe disease and stenosis or hardening in those organs. So lowering the visceral fat's a big deal, and it is helpful in overall health things because it does help your body have better metabolism too, because then your liver's not backed up with a bunch of stuff that is mainly fat and causing it to be severely steatic. Now let's talk about the people who have the negative side effects but don't end up losing weight. Those people have a lot of toxins stored in their fat cells because literally one of the easiest things for the liver to do when it's feeling overwhelmed is to bundle up a toxin in a fat cell and store it for later expulsion when it can deal with the toxin. So, when we're talking about toxic overload and toxic burden, one of the things that I recommend to anyone before they do a weight loss program is that they do a liver detox. Why would you do a liver detox? Because if you actually want to have success with your weight loss program, whether you're using one of these medicines or not, you want your liver pathways to be fully open so that you don't lose your gallbladder. See, when the liver becomes too overwhelmed and it can't do its job, what it does first is stops cleaning the bile. When it stops cleaning the bile, it starts putting garbage into the gallbladder. The gallbladder then ends up with sludge inside it, and calcium deposits form in that sludge, and you get gallstones. That can result in an emergency where you then have to have the gallbladder removed. Once you have the gallbladder removed, your digestion is permanently ruined, and all of your health starts in your gut. So, there you go. You're probably wondering how I can say with confidence that all of your health begins in your gut. Well, if you look at the twin study out of the UK, Kingston University, I believe, is the university. They have 7,200 people in the study. It's 3,600 sets of identical twins. And they look at all the reasons why one might be obese and the other one is not, why one might develop cancer and the other one doesn't, how often someone develops dementia compared to their identical twin, how often someone develops all kinds of different disorders, including Parkinson's, ALS, etc. And what they can prove in their data is that when one twin has certain gut bacteria, they stay skinny. When that identical twin doesn't have that same gut bacteria, they get fat. And it's because they are in a different environment than the identical twin. Usually it ends up being toxic. It creates an imbalance in the gut bacteria. That imbalance in the gut bacteria stops the stimulation of specific bacteria to tell the gut lining to produce GLP-1. So there's that. Obviously, if you have a family history of cancer, you should get checked for cancer before you ever start using a peptide. And part of the reason is that a lot of the peptides on the market can cause a cancer cell to replicate, because it's literally, these peptides are talking about cell turnover and longevity and helping you stay young, right? So if you're getting cell turnover at a very high rate, you have an increased likelihood that a cell that's negative starts replicating very quickly. So any of these should be looked at for cancer. This one specifically, if your family has a history of thyroid medullary cancer, this is not the drug for you. I would also say that if you have a history of type 1 diabetes in your family, this may not be the drug for you either, only because long term, there is some research that shows that this drug does cause pancreatic insufficiency because it wears out the beta cells, which are the cells in the pancreas that produce insulin. If you wear out those cells, it doesn't matter what you do with a GLP-1, you cannot manage your insulin on your own. You are now a type 1 diabetic. Because people are losing weight and they're also being able to clear toxins easier, and they're not storing as much negative estrogen on their body, because that's what your fat cells do. They produce a negative type of estrogen. They are managing their cycles better. Their hormone replacement therapy works better. And for men in particular, their testosterone tends to go up because the estrogen that's negatively being produced by the fat cells goes down. What that does for everyone taking the medication is it lowers inflammation throughout the entire system, which can help with managing autoimmune symptoms and autoimmune diseases, and even put some people's autoimmune diseases into remission. What I think we will start to see in the next 5 years, because there are already some big players in the space talking about it who were prescribing these things way more conservatively a decade ago, and they're starting to talk about it again, is that the doses that we are dosing people at are way too high. We are not managing and teaching them how to manage their nutrition. We are not teaching them about exercise and managing their exercise. We are not teaching them how to build muscle on their body and what it requires to build muscle on their frame. We're not having those conversations with them. We will see the trends that we are seeing in Hollywood. And if you were, I said Grammys the other day, and I meant Oscars. We will see those trends start to happen, where you start to see people who just look completely emaciated because they've lost too much of their subcutaneous fat, which helps with body temperature regulation, but also they have lost way too much muscle and they look almost skeletal. And we know that that is not healthy, because your muscle is your long-term investment in your health. My hope is that before we get to a critical state with that, we really have providers who start stepping up and saying, this medication is not for you because you're not willing to put in the nutrition and the exercise efforts that this requires. There's actually a doctor on this app. He's an ER physician, and what he's seeing as a result of these drugs is a thiamine deficiency. Literally, a thiamine deficiency. The disease is called beriberi. And for the first 20 people who walked into the ER that had it, no one knew what it was, because we haven't seen it in a century. People are malnourishing themselves so much, they're ending up with diseases that are a century old. That's what we're seeing. I personally believe, after seeing what has happened to some of these people as well, unintentionally, is that we're going to see a lot of women go into menopause earlier, because they are malnourished, and we're going to see a lot more low thyroid diagnoses because, again, people are malnourished. Your thyroid needs specific things in order to survive, and thiamine is one of them. This video isn't intended to scare anybody. It's just intended to put out information, give you what the research says and what we're seeing in clinical practice. If you found this helpful, please give me a follow. If you don't want to follow me here, go follow me on YouTube. It's a better account anyway. If you want to join my email list, there's a link down here.